Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
E aí, galera, no podcast de hoje vamos falar de...
Ninguém precisa passar por isso hoje em dia. Tá com gases? Luftal. Ele age rapidinho, em 10 minutos, aliviando a dor e estufamento dos gases e evitando o pum. Porque desfaz os gases ainda na barriga. Chega de passar dor e constrangimento por conta disso.
Bora gravar de novo que agora eu tô pronto.
Luftal Simeticona, indicado para pacientes com excesso de gases no aparelho digestivo. Se persistirem os sintomas, o médico deverá ser consultado. Dezembro de 2024.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Underrated Movie Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have gone under the radar and passed most people by. I am your host, Derek McDuff, and joining me today is a returning guest, Jason Kleeberg of the Force Vibe Podcast. How's it going, Jason? Good to have you back.
I'm good, Derek. How are you?
I am doing very well. Very ready for this holiday season, this very festive episode that we've got here. Going to be talking about, of course, P2, which is a 2007 Christmas psychological horror, borderline almost slasher movie starring Rachel Nichols and Wes Bentley. But before we get too much into that, what did you want to let the people know about yourself and Force 5?
Well, if you like ranking movies and you like lists, I think Force 5 is a good show for you. I basically force a guest to come on, and they come with armed with a movie-related top 5 list topic, and then we discuss our picks on air. So we've got, let's see, the day that this is dropping, I will also have top 5 winter films coming out. So after you listen to this show, go ahead and listen to top 5 winter films. And then at the end of the month, I've got Jason Voorhees himself, Kane Hodder, that's going to be joining me for underrated horror. So it's going to be fun.
That is cool. I will definitely, I'd be checking that one out. That's obviously underrated horror right up my alley. And Jason was always my favorite of all those guys. So I'm very excited to listen to that one. So that's going to be a good episode, I'm sure, as they all are. And as somebody who loves ranking things, I cannot get enough of your show. So.
Hey, I meant to ask you, did you have a Comic-Con appearance this year?
I did, yeah. I had a panel this year talking about underrated movies at Comic-Con. I know that people can't see it there, but I've been keeping my little Comic-Con placard there. So, it was a ton of fun. Had some really good discussions. It was a blast.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. But yeah, for the movie, this I wanted to talk about a Christmas movie that was a little bit off the beaten path. Obviously, talk about underrated movies here, and I'd heard you. I can't remember on what, but you on one of your episodes, probably years ago now, you were talking about some kind of underrated Christmas stuff, and this one came up, and it stuck in my mind, and I was always like, well, I gotta have Jason on at some point to talk about P2. And I think the timing didn't work out last year, but this year I was able to get you on, and I had not actually seen it, but I was really intrigued. Yeah, so first time watch for me. But yeah, I was very, very intrigued to watch it after your description, and I remember when it came out. I think it was right around when I was working at a movie theater. I'd probably just gotten the job there, so I think it was leaving because it, as we'll get to, did not stay around for very long. But yeah. What about this movie? This horror Christmas movie draws you to it?
Well, I like a good... First off, I got to say, I am a huge fan of parking garage scenes in movies. And I don't know what it is, but when I'm writing my own movies, it's like, okay, I got to have something that happens in a parking garage. I'm not sure why. Fair. And there were 2 really great movies in 2007 that I think are underrated that had great parking lot or parking garage scenes.
Mhm.
One was Death Sentence with Kevin Bacon. I
Okay.
think that scene is amazing. And the other is P2 here. So I've always kind of loved P2, and I'm not exactly sure why. It came up on two of my lists actually in the past. So it came up on underrated Christmas movies, and it also came up on top five two-handers. And
Mm.
I love this cat and mouse game. Now, admittedly, as I'm sure we'll get to, some of it doesn't make sense, like character decisions, but I don't really care because the characters, especially Wes Bentley as this insane security guard, which I think as a villain was a little bit ahead of his time, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but I think
Yeah.
he was great as this good guy in quotations, bad
Right.
guy.
Yeah, no, this is for me watching it. I was excited to watch a horror movie set at Christmas. The parking garage setting, like you mentioned, is a unique, interesting thing. They actually shot it in a real parking garage, which gives it this level of kind of authenticity. And yeah, a good just horror two-hander is. I love two-handers in general, so I definitely think I listened to both of those episodes because I'm a big fan of two-handers, big fan of offbeat Christmas movies. And when you're just in a confined space, even though the parking garage is large, it is still a confined space. She's trapped there with it's just the two of them. And every once in a while in these movies, you get to bring in somebody like cops show up or something. It reminded me a lot of like Misery in that way, where it's
Yeah.
just like there's these two people. One is kind of like obsessed with the other. They're torturing him, and like you were saying, this is like almost like a precursor to like incel culture. Obviously those people
Yeah.
existed, and the term existed, but it wasn't really widespread until a few years later. But this guy he feels just so entitled, and brought up Wes Bentley and how I think both the actors in this are pretty underrated. Rachel Nichols is somebody who she shows up and stuff, but never in a starring role. Wes Bentley, I've always been a really big fan of. I think he's incredible, like one of our most underrated actors. I just because they're doing the anniversary of Interstellar. So I just went and saw that last night. Saw him in that. He's great in the Hunger Games. Whenever he pops up, it's always great, and he's very versatile. And he just brings this absolute, hey, I'm a nice like r/nice guy creepiness to this role that I think is phenomenal. And in a lesser actor's hands, this could have been a much worse movie. Whereas here, I think this is just like it's everything I want from a 97-minute horror movie. It's just give me a thing, give me some good set pieces, get me nervous, put some people in peril. I'm all for it.
Yeah, he's quietly put together a really interesting career across both TV now and movies. I also just recently rewatched Interstellar, and I had forgotten all about the fact that he was in it. So when he pops up, it's like, oh man, that's awesome. And then, just he's turned into this really good character actor where he's playing parts like a small part in the end of Mission Impossible Fallout
Oh
or
yeah.
on Yellowstone. He's just kind of there, and he knows exactly what he's there for. He's just giving great performances in small roles, and I love it.
Yeah, definitely, one of those, I guess, underappreciated really actors. Because I think he's a face that people know. But if you say Wes Bentley to the average person, they might be like, who? And you're like, do you remember the guy with the crazy beard in Hunger Games 1? And they're like, oh, that, yeah, okay, he's handsome. I've seen him, and stuff. He's not quite that guy. And he's almost like too handsome to be a traditional character actor. But he
Right.
pulls it off well.
Yeah, he does. He's come so far from being just the kid filming the bag in American Beauty.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I completely forgot about that. But yeah, I think this movie we touched on that it is really does a good job of showing this culture and everything of just kind of that creepy, like, hey, nice guy internet culture, and the white knighting that I think that a lot of, these guys do, where you see him, he's like, I'm here to, like, because she almost gets like assaulted by her coworker in the elevator, and he's like, I'm gonna show this guy that you don't deserve that, and blah 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 blah. And then you find, and he's of course doing the same like things to her when she's A, unconscious, and B, like kidnapping her, and he's just like, oh, we're gonna fall in love, and I'm such a good guy, not like these other guys. And that's such a specific, and obviously we're both like male presenting people, and so we might not have the same visceral reaction, but we still do, I think, have a visceral reaction to this. I can't think of too many other horror movies that are like really about this kind of villain. There's lots of horror movies where it's like woman in peril. Like there's all the slashers. Michael Myers is always chasing Laurie Strode or whatever. But it is a very specific, like, if you're just a woman walking home alone at night or walking through a parking garage, it is like straight up terrifying to be a woman. Like when I see somebody, they just have like a mace, and it's just like a part of their lives that I don't even ever think about. And this really, I think, hones in on that specific horror of half of the world that they have to experience.
Yeah, and if you're a female and then you watch this movie, it's going to be even more harrowing next time you're in a parking garage late at night. This movie could take place at really any time of year, but I think the Christmas setting just kind of gives it a little more flavor, and I really appreciate that about it. I wouldn't call it a traditional Christmas movie because, outside of a song, for example, there's nothing that's like super, super Christmassy about it, but I still love that little extra seasoning that it adds to this stew.
Yeah, I completely agree, because this is a movie, and I think there's people are always like the test of like, well, if you set this not at Christmas, does it still work? And it's like the Die Hard thing. It's like, okay, like you could maybe make some tweaks and the movie might work, but Die Hard, I feel like, people can come after me, but I feel like Die Hard is a Christmas movie because it's like, okay, it's
100%.
set at a Christmas party. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of Christmas stuff in it. If you make it not a Christmas movie or a Christmas party, it has to change. The fact that she's like trying to go home for the holidays, she's this overworked woman who is dealing with like all these abuses all day long, and she just wants to get home, and it's Christmas Eve, and that's why there's nobody here in this parking garage except for this overworked creep who abducts her, and even the cops are like, it's Christmas, I don't want to be doing this. It gives it, like you said, that flavor, but it also, I feel like when you set a movie at Christmas and it's kind of one of these alternative quote unquote Christmas movies, you play off the dichotomy of the Christmas cheer and everything, and how sometimes the holidays are actually like a tough time for a lot of people. I think that lends something to the movie itself when you're playing, the Elvis and the Santa Baby and all these Christmassy upbeat songs, and he's like, even when like she first passes out and she wakes up for a second, he's dressed as Santa. It's like, ho ho ho. It just totally really hits the nail on the head for what this movie's trying to say.
I agree. Man, he's such a great psycho in this.
Yeah, complete nut job. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about the Christmas themes? How do you think this works as a Christmas movie with all the stuff that it's trying to say, I guess, about in its plot and its themes?
Well, like I said, it's not really. It's much in the way like Lethal Weapon is a Christmas movie, right? Like you said, you could probably set this at any other time and it would still work. But if it was set in the summer, for example, I don't know that I'd be going back to rewatch it as much, because I do have this in my holiday rotation. I don't watch it every year, but I watch it every couple of years. I watched it yesterday for this and loved it again. And I don't think that if it was set just in a normal time that I would come back to it a whole lot. And I don't know why that is. I just kind of love it as this really small scale holiday thriller. And like I said, those little kind of tangential nuggets that are dropped about Christmas just help it in so many different ways. I'm also just a big fan of movies set during Christmas time. Love Christmas crime movies, love Christmas horror movies. On Letterboxd, I have this list that I keep updating that has I call it the ultimate holiday horror list. It's got 199 films on it right now. I think it's got every holiday horror film ever made. But listeners, if I'm missing some, please let us know so I can add them. But yeah, it firmly fits in that holiday horror category now that I love, and I don't know why, but that's one of the reasons why I keep coming back to it. And Wes Bentley singing Blue Christmas is amazing.
It's so good. I wish it was on like Spotify or something. I don't think it is. That would be one I'd have to add to my underrated playlist that I've got out there. But so let me ask you quickly then, are you a big Shane Black guy? Because I know his movies are all, set at Christmas and play on that kind of thing.
I'm a big Shane Black fan, so I will see almost anything he puts out. Now, I don't love his directing as much. I'll say like the last Predator movie that he directed, which I think is just, what was it called? Predators, or
I think
what was it called?
It's The Predator, I think.
The Predator, yeah. I
Yeah.
thought that was one of the worst movies I saw that year. But he has also made one of my top 5 movies of all time in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I love The Nice Guys.
Yeah.
So I think he's extremely talented, Last Boy Scout, but yeah, he gets it. He sets his stuff during Christmas. Sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. But the ones when he hits for me, it's like amazing. And that's the same way with the guy who wrote this movie, Alexander Aja. When he is on, he is amazing. Are you a fan of his, or have you seen a lot of his stuff?
I was not familiar with him really before until this movie, and I did a little bit of reading about him in doing the research for this. But you could probably talk about him a lot better than I could.
Yeah, so the first movie I remember seeing of his was High Tension, or Hot Tension in French, and it didn't work for me on a script level, but the care that he put into his filmmaking in that movie is absolutely amazing. Have you seen High Tension?
I haven't.
So there are some scenes of gore in that movie that floored me when I saw it. I saw it when it first came out in 2003, like a small indie theater. And I had a blast with it. And there are scenes in there that will stick with me forever. There's a staircase scene, that's all I'll say, that I will never forget. And after that, he made a couple of things. He did the Hills Have Eyes remake, but I really got back on the Aha train when he did the movie Crawl from 2019, which can seem from the cover like it might be just a generic alligator movie, but wow, Crawl is so much fun. Barry Pepper's in that one. He's great. Again, great gore, great effects. If you haven't seen Crawl, highly recommend that one.
Yeah, that's one I've heard really good things about. It seems to me like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but like one of those horror movies from like an indie guy who gets not a lot of money, but like a good chunk of money, which I feel like this movie also has, because this, it's a movie that it's got people in it. These are actors who are in big movies, but they're not really the stars. And if you look at the budget, it's like $3.5 million, which it's not indie horror, but it's also not something like huge, like $50 million A24, like whatever. I mean, they're making movies for a lot more now. And even though the movie was not, unfortunately, it was not profitable at all. It had one of the worst openings of all time. But it's always nice when you're like, I do love those movies that are like, okay, this guy who they've got some pretty good stuff, we're giving him a little bit more of a toolbox, and I think that's really on display here.
Yeah, and Crawl, he got, I think it was definitely a sub $20 million movie, but that one was profitable. I know that one made a lot of money based on, I think it was like close to $100 million. But that one you can see all $15 million on screen. And, P2, I think you can too. Obviously, it's underrated for a reason. I think it's underrated for a reason. It did not do well at the box office, which I'm sure we'll touch on, but I think you can see that, a couple $1 million on screen as well, especially when we start getting to the car scenes.
Yes, there's some great stuff in this. I think the car scenes are really good. The scene that for me was the standout where I really enjoyed it was when he just drops down the hose in the elevator and the water is all filling up. I thought that was an absolutely phenomenal set piece, and one that really made me kind of like tune back in and like really lock in and be like, oh, okay, like the tension is really ratcheting up, and Wes Bentley's still doing his like, hey, don't even worry about it, I'm such a nice guy, maybe we'll fall in love, and she's just like, dude, fuck this guy, I need to get out of here, now he's trying to drown me. And he's just so delusional. There's that scene where he's like, why would you kill a dog? He's just a nice little dog, and it's like, that dog was like, took a chunk out of her leg. But yeah, I think for me, my favorite set piece was the water scene. Do you have any set pieces or moments that you really enjoyed in this movie? Or maybe not enjoy is the right word, but that stood out to you?
Yeah, there's two that absolutely stand out. Obviously, the elevator is great. I think that Wes singing the Elvis song is great because they just have him pantomime a song, and it's essentially the whole song. He puts on a record, he's dancing to it, he hugs a little bear while he's doing it, and it's intercut with our heroine, trying to get free. And that's a great scene. I think it just shows how much fun Wes was having on set. And then the other one is where Wes's character has the coworker that tried to grope her in the elevator. So he's got him tied to a chair, and he tries to teach him a lesson. And the whole time, again, he's, this guy's a bad guy. I'm a good guy. Why would you do this to her? She's not a slut. And then he like beats him around with a flashlight. I believe he has a big flashlight in his hand, beats him with it. And then the way he finishes that scene off is just really well done. Aha, like I said, has a practical gore. He's just very good at practical gore. And we see it when he smashes this guy with a car, not once, not twice, but 3 times up against a wall. And it's still like he's playing with them at first, which is just, it's chilling. But as a viewer who's seen it, 4 or 5 times now, it's also really fun.
Yeah, and you bring up the practical gore and stuff like that. I really appreciated that in this movie because it felt not over the top and realistic, which I feel like that has been a trend with a lot of horror movies recently. You get your stuff like, and no shade on these movies, but your stuff like Terrifier, which also just had a Christmas movie, where everything is just like so over the top, and like the Saw franchise and like all these movies which are just becoming more bloody and ridiculous. And this is like the fact that it's not like his head doesn't fly off and like it's just like he's bleeding. You can like be like, oh, this guy's bleeding internally. That's for me a lot more intense, like that kind of gore where it's like this looks like someone actually dying. Like there's a chunk that came out of her leg. Like I think the only moment that is a little bit like really tense is when like you see that like close up of like the eyeball getting stabbed. I know people have a big thing about eyes and but even that it's like realistically shot, and then you kind of like have him crawling along or whatever before he gets lit on fire, which is just such a great moment. It's such a it's part of that, like, I don't know if you've seen the memes of like the Good for Her cinematic universe, but that's how it felt really there at the end. So I was definitely impressed by the look of this movie quite a bit. And it's
Merry
and
Christmas,
it's crazy
Thomas.
right. And it's crazy because it looks so good and it's like so dark, the whole time, but because it's in a parking garage, it's very poorly lit, but it never doesn't look great.
Saí da escola já com uma formação profissional no currículo? Metodologia por projetos? Preparação para o Enem? Atividades extras gratuitas, como acesso a oficinas, simulados, vagas de estágio, Olimpíadas do Conhecimento e muito mais? Esse é o Ensino Médio Técnico do Senac. Quer saber? Senac. Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino médio e saiba mais. Ideal mesmo para o mundo atual seria fazer o ensino médio junto com o curso técnico, certo? É no Senac que o aluno tem autonomia de verdade, formação cidadã, foco na diversidade, preparação para o Enem, material didático sem taxas e muito mais. Na real, tem tudo que você precisa para se sentir preparado para a vida. Seja para entrar no mundo do trabalho ou te ajudar a decidir o que fazer na faculdade. Quer saber? Senac. Vem comigo! Acesse sp.senac.br/ensino-médio-técnico.
Yeah, I was going to say the car scene at the end looks amazing. Like it feels like Thomas is handcuffed to that car when it's blowing up. And that's not easy to do if you're not good at it. People will try to mask it with cuts and stuff, but we see Thomas wriggling in the fire. And I think that's something that totally adds to that movie.
Yeah. Very, very great practical stuff done in this. To kind of backpedal a little bit and circle back to something you touched on a while ago that I thought was really interesting was you were talking about how, you watch this movie every Christmas, and it's something you probably wouldn't watch necessarily if it wasn't, a quote unquote Christmas movie. And I think that's a really interesting point and something I've brought up in the past, but I think that the movies that are like really can be really successful, not that this one was successful, but movies that can be successful, can be return watches, are often built into some kind of ritualistic thing like that. I think of the movies that I rewatch. There's a couple movies that I'll rewatch every year, like Princess Mononoke or Indiana Jones or something. I'll rewatch most years. just because they're so, so good and they're my favorite movies of all time. But then there's a lot of other movies that, it's like, okay, it's February 2nd. It's a good day to watch Groundhog Day, or it's a shout out a future episode you're going to do. It's Friday the 13th. My local theater, shout out to the Frida. If you're in South Orange County, check out the Frida. They do every Friday the 13th. They do the next Friday the 13th movie, by giving these specific times of the year, it's like, okay, now it's time to watch this movie. I think that's something special. As humans, we love our kind of rituals. We love our going to back to something familiar. I've been rewatching a lot of Christmas movies, and as I'm sure a lot of people out there listening are, because it's that time of the year, whether it's something like P2 or if it's like a comedy like Scrooged, I watched that a lot of years, or it's, Muppet Christmas Carol, whatever it might be. Elf, I know, is a big one. I think that's part of the reason that movie is stuck around for so long. It's because once a year, for, about a month or so, people were like, hey, let's get in the vibes. Even when I've been editing this show, recently I've just been kind of having it on low in the background while I edit, and just kind of like letting the holiday stuff play out. Because it does get you in that holiday mood, even when it's something like this, where it's like, sure, he's singing Blue Christmas as he's trying to murder someone or abduct someone, whatever, but you're still like, okay, now I feel like it's Christmas time.
Yeah. I mean, I have those movies too, but it is one of those things where in December, like, well, I kind of want to watch a horror movie. I'm not going for Friday the 13th in December. I'm going for Black Christmas. I'm going for Christmas Evil. I'm going for Dial Code Santa Claus. I'm going for these movies that like are weird, but still have to do with Christmas. And P2 is certainly one of those ones that I grab for.
Yeah, definitely. And we'd been kind of dancing around the movie and how it did not do very well at the box office. It also didn't do great critically. Looking it up, it looks like it has like a 37% on Rotten Tomatoes. It made worldwide, I think, $7 million or something, which it did definitely, once you factor in all the marketing stuff like that, did not make its money back. I think it, like I touched on before, it had one of the worst openings of all time, like domestic box office wise. It made almost no money, like for a super wide release, which this was. It opened in over 2,000 theaters. People were not coming out to this movie. Why do you think that it was such a flop and a bomb?
That's a good question, because 12 of those dollars were mine. I don't remember what the advertising was like for this. I don't remember what it was up against. So it's tough for me to diagnose why it did so poorly. I think the reviews were also unkind.
Mm-hmm.
And again, what do you want in a slasher during Christmas time? I mean, this gives you everything that you would want. If you're a slasher fan, you're going to like something like this. Then again, critics are sometimes really tough on horror movies, so it could have been any of those things. But that's why we're here, to give it a second life on Underrated,
That is the mission statement here. Yeah. And yeah, it's with horror movies, like you said, a lot of times they don't get a fair shake from critics. I feel like they're not really seen for what they are a lot of times. And for me, like this, like I quite enjoyed this movie for what it was. I went into this knowing that it's not going to reinvent the wheel. I don't know what else I could really ask for from a horror movie. It's just like, it's a two-hander. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's one setting. You get in, you get out. If this movie was Terrifier length, if this was a 3-hour movie, I would have probably really hated it. But the fact, and if it had like all these characters and all these different plots, but I love a simple movie, and I love a complex movie too. But I do love just, hey, throw this on for a little bit. I was like, cool, I don't have to spend my whole day watching this movie. I could just kind of put it on, take some notes for the podcast, and be ready to go, So it's just some great performances, just a good showcase for some good acting, good thrills, good writing, So I don't know what else people wanted, because it seems like it should have, at least with audiences, done well, maybe at a different time, maybe in a world that is gotten used to a lot of these grungier movies from like your Blumhouses and your A24s and all these horror movies that are getting made for $5 million now. Maybe it would have done better. Maybe, this movie comes out on streaming today and it, finds a home there. But 2007, I don't know, maybe just wrong time.
I agree. I think if this came out today, or if it was, in 3 years, for 20 years, you remake it and you have the same kind of villain, I think it does well. I mean, I do think it was ahead of its time. And Wes Bentley is great as this villain. And sometimes you don't get that in a slasher. You often don't have a charismatic villain in slashers. Most of the time you have a masked, faceless killer. And I think he does great in this. So honestly, if you're listening to this and you like slashers and you haven't seen P2, I say go in with an open mind. I think you're going to have a ton of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I really agree with all of that. It's just solid movie. That's the best possible way I can put it. Wes Bentley knocks it out of the park, and like we've been alluding to, it ages very well. In the subsequent years, as you've seen incels and like all of this stuff come out, and just like people like really like the vitriol, the feedback loop of just like dudes online thinking they are owed something by women, because that's really this guy's whole mission statement, is that because he perceives her, because in his mind he loves her, she owes him something. And these other guys are all awful, but no, for us it's true. And that has become such a thing, especially with all these like fucking dorks on the internet telling people just like to be angry at women, and just all the fucking Andrew Tates and all these people of the fucking world. It's become so much more of a thing that, incredibly ahead of its time, I think.
I agree. And if you don't trust us, then trust somebody who traditionally really didn't love horror movies, Roger Ebert, who gave this 3 out of 4 stars. When a lot of other people were not giving it a chance, he came through and went to bat for P2.
That's interesting. I that's one thing I'm always like. A lot of times you'll see these big critics and stuff like that, and they're always kind of like aligned with the mainstream. With Ebert, it's like I never know what he's going to think about any movie ever. Like that's why I will always respect him, is because he had his own opinions, and if he watched P2 and he liked it and nobody else did, he was going to write a good review about it. And yeah, so that's why I think he became such an incredible, renowned critic, is because of stuff like that.
I agree.
Any other thoughts you have on the movie overall, or anything specific about it too?
Not really. I think we kind of covered everything that I wanted to cover. I just hope that people give this one a chance. Like I said, it made 2 of my top 5 lists so far. I could have put it on a couple of other ones, but yeah, I have a real soft spot for P2. And when you reached out to me and you were like, hey, do you want to come on and do P2? It's like, you know what? I didn't watch it last year, so I'm definitely down to watch it again this year and talk about it.
I'm glad you were down, because this was a lot of fun. Really glad I got to see this one, add it to the Christmas movie, because I'm always looking for Christmas stuff that's a little bit off the beaten path. So with that, then I just got to ask you brought up a lot of them earlier. Are there any Christmas horror or just less traditional Christmas movies that you wanted to shout out as some of your favorites, maybe to recommend to some people?
Better Watch Out is one from 2016 that I have a lot of fun with. I think that one is quite good. Let's see, adult horror. Last year's Christmas Bloody Christmas is a lot of fun by Joe Begas. That's like What If the Terminator, but Santa Claus.
You talked about that on your show, right? I want to say.
I may have.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and then one other one that I will keep championing, and this was also on my underrated Christmas movies episode, but Anna and the Apocalypse from 2017 is a comedy zombie horror musical. And if you think, well, those things can't go together, it works in Anna and the Apocalypse. It's an Irish movie, I believe. Irish or Scottish. Maybe it's from Scotland.
Irish, yeah. Oh, is okay.
It's Scottish, but it is so much fun, and the songs are in my Christmas rotation. So go and check that out.
Yeah, great movie. That was actually, so if people want to go back and listen, that was my Christmas episode actually last year for underrated Christmas movies.
Oh, tight.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I had a Christmas podcaster that came on and talked about that one, and yeah, obviously I think there's a lot of the great underrated Christmas movies. Go back through the archives. We always do at least one, if not more, every year. So and last year was Anna and the Apocalypse, but I've also done one of my favorite ever Christmas movies that I think is a little underrated, Arthur Christmas, but specifically for horror. I think that, and this is obviously not underrated, so it's pretty mainstream, but my favorite Christmas horror is always going to be Gremlins. I love Gremlins.
Oh,
yeah. Both Gremlins movies are great, but like Gremlins 1 is just like, I remember I was watching it. My friend had like a movie night around Halloween. I was like, okay, we're gonna watch a Halloween. I was like, it's not a Halloween movie, it's a Christmas movie. It has one of the greatest Christmas speeches of all time, where it's Phoebe Cates, right? And she talks about like him being in the chimney. Yeah, I love that.
And Gizmo's a Christmas present.
Yes, it's perfect. It's really, the macabre Christmas vibes are so perfectly set. The darkness with the little twinkling lights and everything. I can't get enough of it.
I agree. One more that I'll throw out there before we get out of here is Silent Night from 2021. I'm not going to say much about it, but it stars Keira Knightley, who is fast becoming one of my favorite actors. I think she's great.
Yeah.
And it's about this family that has a bunch of other families over for Christmas as this kind of tradition, but this Christmas is different. Everybody's dressed up really nice, and you'll find out why when you watch it. It's a very dark comedy, so go in knowing that, but Silent Night from 2021 is a blast, especially if you go in blind.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. I'm a very, very big Keira Knightley fan. Saw Pirates of the Caribbean at a young age, so it was very impressionable. Big fan of hers. Tremendous actor. So yeah, I'm going to have to watch that one. But yeah, thank you so much for being on, talking about this movie. I always love doing these Christmas episodes, doing things a little bit different. One more time before you go, you want to let the people know about Force 5?
Yeah, Force 5 you can find anywhere you're listening to this. Again, if you like lists, if you like ranking things, it's always a show that I think people will watch and then think to themselves, what would I put on my list? And that's just kind of fun. So check that out. I already talked about what's coming out for the rest of December, but also in January, we're going to have top 5 films by Canadian directors and top 5 hot priests. So be sure to tune in for those.
Very nice, very nice. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. If you're a Force 5 fan, you just came over here, I would love you guys to stick around. We just recently hit 150 episodes. Been doing some cool stuff like we mentioned at the beginning of the show. Got to do Comic-Con recently. That episode's on the feed as well. Check that out. If you are a fan and you want to give the show a like, give us 5 stars, however you're listening to it, give us a subscription, or look up Underrated Movie Podcast on all the socials, or just go to underratedmoviepodcast.com. Got all the stuff there. We have a Patreon where we do some bonus episodes. Going to be starting a new series where I'm going to be talking about 3D movies and watching them in 2D and seeing how they hold up, called Across the Second Dimension. That's going to be starting next year, so about a month from when this releases will be the first episode on Jaws 3D and 2D. And then, you can find some of my other podcast stuff. I do on opposite Mondays to this one, a podcast called Midnight Film Society, where I just talk about new releases, my buddy Damien. And then infrequently I also do an MCU podcast called Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones. Thank you everyone so much for listening. Jason, thank you one more time for being on, and I'll see you guys all next time for next episode is Coal Miner's Daughter. Check that one. Come back and check that one.